Everyone seems to agree that this is a firearm, but there's a lot of debate as to whether or not this is a firearm. So that's what we'll be talking about today. I'm Dustin, and you're watching Guns of the West. This is a topic that comes up a lot in the comment sections of my videos. Sometimes people tell me I mistakenly called something like this a firearm because it isn't one, and sometimes people tell me that they are convicted felons or other, generally restricted people, and they like black powder guns because they're allowed to have them. So, are they allowed to have them? Is this actually a firearm? That's what we're going to talk about. But the first thing I need to say is, I am not an attorney. Nothing in this video should be taken as legal advice. It's just a discussion. So let's start with some definitions, and we'll go first to Merriam-Webster. Firearm, noun, a weapon from which a shot is discharged by gunpowder, usually used of small arms. Well, by that definition, this definitely is a firearm. How about dictionary.com? Let's see what they had to say. Firearm, noun, a small arms weapon as a rifle or pistol from which a projectile is fired by gunpowder. Well, that was very much the same, so this is a firearm by that standard as well. So, if we're just going by what the word firearm means in the English language, yes, this is a firearm, and this is a firearm. They both meet that definition. Now we're going to take a look at what Congress calls a firearm, because that's where it gets interesting. Some people mistakenly, I think, confuse the English language definition with a legal definition, because a legal definition might not really be what a word means, except as it applies in the law. But let's go ahead and take a look at what Congress had to say. So this is uscode.house.gov, and we were looking in federal code at Title 18, Section 921, which is definitions. And if we come down to number 3, about the middle of your screen, the term firearm means A, any weapon, including a starter gun, which will or is designed to or may readily be converted to expel a projectile by the action of an explosive. B, the frame or receiver of any such weapon. C, any firearm muffler or firearm silencer. Or D, any destructive device. Such term does not include an antique firearm. Well, even there, at the beginning of that definition, it seemed like this would qualify as well. But did you catch what it said there at the end? It said it does not include an antique firearm. Now, if you read in other areas of federal law, it will say that that also includes replicas of antique firearms, which is what this is. This is a modern reproduction made by Uberti of the Colt Walker. So that'd be a replica, but it would still qualify as an antique firearm. But notice that term. Antique what? Antique firearm. So even there, they're acknowledging that it is a firearm, but it's not going to apply in the federal law like a firearm, if that makes sense. Now, the next place we're going to take a look is at the ATF website on a question and answer page. Now, this is a bit long-winded, so bear with me. We're going to get some good information here. We're trying to find out, can a felon or otherwise restricted person actually legally possess one of these? So here on atf.gov, this question is, can a person prohibited by law from possessing a firearm acquire and use a black powder muzzleloading firearm? And I think it would be easy to say that a black powder revolver would fall within what they're talking about with black powder muzzleloading firearms. Well, for the answer it says, the Gun Control Act of 1968, or GCA, prohibits felons and certain other persons from possessing or receiving firearms and ammunition, those prohibited persons. These categories can be found at Title 18, Section 922G and N, and it gives a link. However, federal law does not prohibit these persons from possessing or receiving an antique firearm. The term antique firearm means any firearm, including any firearm with a matchlock, flintlock, percussion cap, or similar type of ignition system manufactured in or before 1898. The definition includes any replica of an antique firearm if it is not designed or redesigned for using rimfire or conventional centerfire fixed ammunition, or uses rimfire or conventional centerfire ammunition which is no longer manufactured in the United States and which is not readily available in ordinary channels of commercial trade. Further, any muzzle-loading rifle, shotgun, or pistol which is designed to use black powder or black powder substitute and which cannot use fixed ammunition is an antique firearm unless it 1. Incorporates a firearm frame or receiver, 2. Is a firearm which is converted into a muzzle-loading weapon, or 3. Is a muzzle-loading weapon which can be readily converted to fire fixed ammunition by replacing the barrel, bolt, breech block, or any combination thereof, and tells you to see Title 18, Section 921A3 and A16. Now let's read on. Thus, a muzzle-loading weapon that meets the definition of an antique firearm is not a firearm and may lawfully be received and possessed by a prohibited person under the Gun Control Act. In addition, the Gun Control Act defines the term ammunition to mean ammunition or cartridge cases, primers, bullets, or propellant powder designed for use in any firearm. Because an antique firearm is not a firearm, is lawful. I'm going to say that's a typo. It should say it would be lawful or it is lawful for a prohibited person to receive or possess black powder designed for use in an antique firearm. Also, the federal explosives laws do not make it unlawful for a prohibited person to acquire and possess black powder in quantities not exceeding 50 pounds if it is intended to be used solely for sporting, recreational, or cultural purposes in antique firearms. See Title 18, Section 845A5. But then it goes on to say, by contrast, a prohibited person may not receive or possess black powder firearms that can be readily converted to fire fixed ammunition by replacing the barrel, bolt, breech block, or any combination thereof. Now, I won't bore you with the rest of that paragraph because that's where it gets into talking about other guns that are converted away and things like that. That goes beyond what we're talking about here. Well, you all saw right there on the ATF website that a convicted felon under federal law is perfectly allowed to possess one of these. So, does that mean that convicted felons and other restricted people are in the clear, then, to possess black powder guns? No. But wait a minute, Dustin, you just read it, and it said they can have them. Well, here's the problem, and where a lot of confusion comes in. That's talking about federal law, like the Gun Control Act. But in this country, we have individual states, and within those, we have individual counties and individual cities. And you have to be careful of state law as well as federal law. So maybe in some states they might be in the clear depending on what the state laws are. And another thing, some states even allow cities and counties to have their own rules on top of the state laws, which are then on top of the federal laws. So we have multiple layers of laws to worry about with something like this. The ATF there is saying under federal law it's no problem, but you need to check the laws of where you are. Just recently I was working on a project for my regular job, reading up on some Arkansas laws, and let me show you something that jumped out at me. So here at dps.arkansas.gov, on this definitions page, let's come down to number 14, where it defines loaded firearm. It says, loaded firearm means a firearm that is assembled and contains an unexpended cartridge, shell, or projectile in the firing position, including, without limitation, A, for a pistol or revolver, when an unexpended cartridge, shell, or projectile is in a position in which the unexpended cartridge, shell, or projectile could be fired by one manual operation of any mechanism, and B, for a muzzle-loading firearm, when the muzzle-loading firearm is charged with a propellant and a projectile and is capped or primed. By that Arkansas statute, if I take this black powder gun and I fill the chambers with powder, then I add the projectiles, and I actually put the percussion caps on the nipples, this would be a loaded firearm by Arkansas law. Now let's read on. Now we're going to come down here to possession of firearms by certain persons. except as provided in subsection D of this section, or unless authorized by and subject to such conditions as prescribed by the governor or his or her designee, or the United States Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, or other bureau or office designated by the United States Department of Justice, no person shall possess or own any firearm who has been 1. Convicted of a felony, 2. Adjudicated mentally ill, or 3. Committed involuntarily to any mental institution. Did you catch something interesting there? We already established that this will qualify under Arkansas law as a loaded firearm. And let's take one more look at one of those lines in that next section again. Let's look at the bottom line of that paragraph again. No person shall possess or own any firearm who has been convicted of a felony, etc., etc. Any firearm, and we've already established that that black powder revolver in Arkansas is easily a firearm. But wait a minute. Let's not skip to that line so fast. Let's go back up here to where it says A. It says except, as in there are exceptions. So it says except as provided in subsection D. But the problem with that is if you come to this website and look at subsection D, it's talking about things like governor pardons, not things like antique firearms or replicas of antique firearms. But that's not all. It says or unless authorized and subject to such conditions as prescribed by the governor or his or her designee, or the United States Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, or other bureau or office designated by the United States Department of Justice. Well, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, Explosive, that's ATF again. So you could argue that this is saying the rule that we read before in the ATF website would supersede this and make it so, yes, a person convicted of a felony or other, restricting qualifier would make it so, they would be able to possess a firearm. But we don't always see it go that way. That seems to be how I read it, but I don't see this as an automatic way out. I see it as a mess because of the wording. Yes, it lists that exception, but also says no person shall possess or own any firearm. So you're going to have that argument, and you're going to have it in court. Even if you win, even if you're acquitted, that's expensive. It's a nightmare. And that's just one state. That's just Arkansas, 1 out of 50, not to mention there's also DC. So it takes a lot of research before we just automatically say somebody like a felon can possess a black powder gun. Again, that seems like that would say on that Arkansas law that the ATF rule would apply there under state law as well. But court cases don't always go the way they seem like they obviously should. It's amazing some of the things that I've seen over my career as a firearm instructor and teaching concealed carry and watching court cases. Again, I'm not an attorney, and thank goodness that's more than I want to take on. But I've seen some amazing things that really surprised me. Also, another thing to keep in mind, I'm sure there are plenty of states that don't specifically list the ATF's words as an exception for somebody. And other things to remember, some states might not call it a firearm, but might say dangerous weapons are not allowed to be possessed by certain people, or deadly weapons are not allowed to be possessed by certain people. And that would certainly include something like this. So the language isn't even always the same that's used from one state to another. So again, as I said before, we need to remember we have layers of laws in this country, and those of you watching in other parts of the world, you have your own that you need to worry about aside from what we do here in the United States. But anyway, I hope this was somewhat helpful for you, and I'd really love to receive comments down below on this. What's your take on all of it? What are the laws like in your state, if you don't mind sharing? And please don't forget to click that like button down below and subscribe to the channel so you can see more videos. There are plenty more to come, including plenty more videos about black powder firearms. And if you look in the description, you'll see where to find me on social media, as well as where to find all the great Guns of the West products. Thank you so much for watching.